last year when it raised the rate by a quarter percentage point. We'll have much more details on this story during our next newscast at noon Korea time. A senior North Korean official known as Kim Jong-un's de facto chief of staff has reportedly visited Vladivostok amid speculation Kim will travel to Russia next week for a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Japan's Fuji News Network aired on Wednesday footage that it claims shows Kim Chang-son inspecting areas around Vladivostok station. Citing Russian government officials, Japan's Kyodo news agency also reported one of the regime's high-level officials is currently in Vladivostok, and it looks to be Kim Chang-son. According to Russia's daily newspaper Izvestia, on Wednesday, Moscow's foreign ministry confirmed that a Russia-North Korea summit is expected to be held next week in Vladivostok. It also said Putin will sit down with Kim before he travels to China for the One Belt, One Road summit on the 26th and 27th of April. Now, President Trump's hawkish national security chief is insisting North Korea needs to show a real indication that it's ready to abandon its nuclear arsenal before the two sides can sit down for a third summit. Kim Hyo-sung with the details.
White House National Security Advisor John Bolton has called for more evidence from North Korea that suggests the regime is ready to abandon its nuclear weapons before the leaders of Pyongyang and Washington sit down for a third summit. In an interview with Bloomberg on Wednesday, he also said the U.S. hopes to see, quote, a real indication from the North that it has made a strategic decision to give up its nuclear weapons. He also explained that President Trump is fully prepared to hold a third summit if he can get a real deal. Bolton's remarks seem to be in line with Washington's stance that it will not rush while opening up the possibility for a third summit. It's also seen as a reaffirmation of the need for practical denuclearization measures by the North before resuming the nuclear negotiations that aim to reach, quote, a big deal. Regarding a possible third summit, President Trump said earlier in the week that North Korea-U.S. dialogue does not have to move quickly, but added that a third meeting with Kim Jong-un would be good. Kim Hyo-sung, Arirang News.
Now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reportedly supervised the test fire of a new tactical weapon on Wednesday. The state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday on Kim's activities, but did not provide details on the weapon itself. Kim reportedly said the completion of the weapon system is important in increasing the combat power of the North Korean army, adding it's good that such research is actively underway. This is the first time in 5 months that Kim has supervised the test of a new tactical weapon developed by the regime. Pundits say it could be a sign the North is strengthening its security and defense system amid concerns about its nuclear standoff with the US. Now, let's turn our attention to President Moon Jae-in's three-nation tour of Central Asia. The South Korean leader is due to leave Turkmenistan in the coming hours. He's been touring a massive petrochemical plant site built by a consortium led by South Korean builders. Our Shin Se-min, who is travelling with the president, files this report from Turkmenistan.
President Moon Jae-in will wrap up his three-day state visit to Turkmenistan on Thursday by visiting a site that's a source of pride for many Koreans. He travels to the western port city of Turkmenbashi, Kiyanly, home to a petrochemical plant built by a global consortium led by Korea's Hyundai Engineering and LG International. Completed late last year, the plant is the largest petrochemical factory anywhere in Central Asia and the first such plant in Turkmenistan, with the capacity to turn out 6 million tons of natural gas annually. Hyundai Engineering says the petrochemical products from the plant could generate profits of up to $600 million for the Turkmen government every year. And geopolitically speaking, Turkmenistan sits on the path of the South Korean president's envisioned new northern policy that includes Eurasian nations and Russia. With the South Korean leader actually leaving a footprint at the petrochemical site, President Moon hopes to ultimately drive more business deals between the two nations. It's a win-win strategy given that South Korea has been losing out to big overseas orders in recent years, while Turkmenistan's overdependence on few neighboring countries was driven home in 2015 when Russia cut gas imports from Turkmenistan. And with the support of their leaders, more lucrative deals could be on the horizon for South Korea.
During their summit, the two leaders agreed to further enhance cooperative businesses for the second and the third Kiyanly projects built on their bilateral trust and friendship.
The two also agreed on Wednesday to upgrade their energy plant cooperation while seeking ways to expand their ties in the fields of health, medical care, and ICT. After promising a prosperous future cooperation, President Moon will embark on his second leg of his trip in Central Asia and head to Uzbekistan, where the two countries already enjoy close trade. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Ashgabat.
Now, one of the main reasons for President Moon's trip to Turkmenistan is to boost economic ties with that Central Asian nation, particularly, as we just heard there, in the energy sector. South Korea is already actively participating in the construction of power plants in that country. Our Park Hee-jun has this report.
South Korea's trade volume with Turkmenistan is relatively low, but has great potential for growth. Main exports to Turkmenistan include automobiles, metal goods, and IT devices, while imports center on textiles. But the most promising growth comes from the energy sector. The value of construction orders received for energy plants amounts to a total of $10 billion as of this month. South Korean companies earned the Central Asian country's trust by successfully building numerous energy plants contributing to the Turkmen economy. Global consortiums led by Korean firms completed a natural gas processing plant in Gaokanish and a petrochemical plant in Kiyanly. The Kiyanly plant alone is expected to generate an annual profit of $600 million for the Turkmenistan government. And with the leaders of South Korea and Turkmenistan having agreed to push for further cooperation in the area, it's anticipated that President Moon Jae-in's visit this week will create momentum for landing further deals on energy projects. Turkmenistan also boasts the world's fourth largest supply of natural gas, making up to 10% of global reserves. South Korea hopes to boost cooperation in developing resources in its efforts to diversify industries. And with the two countries having signed MOUs during their bilateral summits, economic cooperation is also expected to advance in other sectors, such as transportation, logistics, ICT, healthcare, and sports. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, Tottenham Hotspur forward Son Heung-min has been on fire as of late, and his red-hot form continued Wednesday night in his team's second leg Champions League quarter-final against Manchester City, and he did it without the help of his injured teammate and England star Harry Kane. Lee Sung-jae reports.
Epic is an understatement to describe the second leg of the Champions League quarterfinals matchup between Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester City. After scoring the lone goal in Tottenham's 1-0 win in the first leg, Son Heung-min didn't wait long to add more goals to his already impressive tally. After Man City got on the scoreboard after just 4 minutes, the South Korean international answered back with goals in the 7th and 10th minute, scoring a double in the first 10 minutes of the match. The match ended with Manchester City winning 4-3, but a 4-4 aggregate with Tottenham scoring 3 big away goals means the London club advanced to the semi-finals. Son, however, will not be able to play in the first leg of the semis, with a yellow in this match, the second he's accumulated in the quarterfinals. Despite that, the double gave Son his 19th and 20th goal in all competition this season, but also his 12th career goal in Champions League play. He surpasses Uzbekistani legend in Maxim Shatskikh, who scored 11 career Champions League goals during his career. Son scored his first ever Champions League goal back in 2014 while he was with Bayer Leverkusen in Germany's Bundesliga at the time. Fast forward less than 5 years, he's now the top scoring Asian player in Champions League history. Lee Sung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, K-pop group BTS and the chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Lee Hoe-sung have been named on Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people. Selected as one of the 17 artists on the honorary list, BTS released their new album, Map of the Soul Persona, last week. That is expected to top the US Billboard 200 and the UK and official albums chart. The chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, one of the 21 leaders picked by Time magazine. He's been leading the body, and this body was assigned to assess climate science since 2015. A former Peruvian president has died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong-yu. So we hear that he committed suicide to avoid arrest in connection with a bribery probe.
Right, Mark. Peru's former president Garcia died in a hospital in Lima hours after he shot himself in the head when police arrived to execute an arrest warrant at his home. After his death was confirmed by the current president Martin Vizcarra, supporters gathered outside the hospital. Garcia was accused of taking bribes from one of Latin America's largest construction firms, the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht, when he was serving his second term as president. Garcia served as president from 1985 to 1990 and again from 2006 to 2011. He had repeatedly denied the claims, saying he was the victim of political persecution, and said there was no shred of evidence against him on his last tweet on Tuesday. Last November, he sought asylum at the Uruguayan embassy, but his request was rejected in December. Garcia was not the only one facing such allegations, as Odebrecht officials had shipped cash across the globe to politicians' pockets in a dozen countries, including Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, and Mozambique. 3 of Peru's other most recent presidents are also being investigated for alleged corruption. Reconstruction of Notre Dame could take up to 40 years, according to experts in charge of restoration at other historic cathedrals. They say a segment of the cathedral has been very weakened by the blaze, and materials for the buildings, such as about 3,000 trees and tons of limestone, need to be found. But France's President Emmanuel Macron is planning to rebuild the cathedral within 5 years. Macron pledged to rebuild it even more beautifully in a nationwide address this week. More than $1 billion in donations have poured in for the restoration project. Greenpeace activists have been demonstrating outside Nestle headquarters in Vevey, accusing the company of not making efforts to reduce plastic waste. Activists brought out a giant creature made of the company's plastic waste in front of the headquarters. They also had canoes and kayaks at the Le Mans Lake with banners that urged to stop using unrecyclable plastic. Greenpeace says Nestle is not delivering on its promise to make all their packaging recyclable by 2025. The company had also promised to push the use of compostable and biodegradable materials.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information that's useful for your everyday life, whether you are in Korea or you have an interest in Korea and you're watching us somewhere else around the world. Today we're going to focus on culture, and namely something to do with language. So to explain what's going on in South Korea right now, I'm happy to say, for the second time, with me at least, Won Jong-hwan is in the studio for us. So Jong-hwan, what do you have for us today?
So, Mark, before I go any further, how good is your Korean, and where and how do you practice it?
Right, well, you're putting me on the spot here, Jong-hwan. But 요즘 공부 시간 별로 없어서 실력이 많이 떨어졌어요. How about that? Does that sound okay?
Wow, that's actually pretty amazing.
No,
Mark.
but to answer your question, I started studying in class at a university for about 2 years. I did every weekday, 4 hours a day, and then I'd go home and do homework until I reached a certain point and my schedule got too busy, and then I just had to stop. But I still speak Korean at home with my wife. Yeah. So it's nice to keep up, but definitely I felt like my Korean skills have gone down a bit.
Well, in fact, it is not so common yet, but when I go around Seoul, I sometimes notice there are some foreign visitors who actually speak Korean quite fluently.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I could probably say
Better than
more.
me.
Because probably say more and more Koreans are actually getting used to the Korean language itself, thanks to the growing popularity of Korean culture and the television drama series that goes abroad. But I always wonder, like how you did it and stuff, I always wondered how those foreigners actually study the language. Indeed, to get a closer look into how foreigners do it, I went to the Korean Language Education Center at Seoul National University. The institute was established in 1969 and aims to teach Korean language and culture to international students, intending to learn Korean language as a foreign language or their second language. Over 28,000 students from more than 90 countries have graduated from the programs laid out by the institute, and the program invites some 500 students every semester from overseas. I had a chance to peek in on one of the classes. I first asked him, what's the most difficult thing about learning Korean?
영어하고 한국어 아주 큰 차이가 있어서 좀 헷갈려요. 그 문장을 쓸 때 좀 반대하는 방법이 있어서 좀 계속 배우면 잘 할 수 있을 것 같아요.
사실 말하기 시험 볼 때 괜찮은데 한국 사람과 말할 때 그렇게 쉽지 않아요.
But despite their difficulties in learning Korean, more non-Koreans are studying Korean academically nowadays. As for real classrooms, some 57,000 students are studying at over 170 branches of the government-backed King Sejong Institute, from Nairobi to Minsk and from London to Tokyo. Further evidence of the language's popularity can be found in the number of takers of the test for proficiency in Korean. A total of some 260,000 people took the topic in 2018, up 77% from 2010. In fact, the number of such students has been growing sharply over the past few years, to the point where some are saying the number of foreign Korean literature and language students is similar to locals. Experts explain the phenomenon has resulted from the increasing number of foreign nationals who want to become Korean language specialists. And of course, this is thanks to the extra attention South Korea and its culture have been receiving from abroad.
Well, it's great to see that so many people out there are interested in learning Korean. It is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn if you aren't a native speaker, and I still feel embarrassed for speaking Korean on Arirang News.
That was pretty good.
Well, I've never done it before, Jong-un. 아직도 창피해요, I should say. So I suppose looking at that, are these classes really worth it? Are you going to get your money's worth, or are there other options out there where you can perhaps go about being just as good, if not better, without sitting in class for hours on end?
Well, maybe, but talking with those native-like foreigners that I recently encountered, they said studying at Language Center isn't always the answer for making it perfect. Indeed, the group of students I met told me that academic way of approaching didn't really help them to reach the level they are at the moment. I followed them around to see how they study the language, and I noticed they enjoyed using Korean. In fact, the language was part of them at their daily lives. For instance, when they order something at a restaurant or just watching their favorite K-drama shows.
제 생각엔 혼자 이렇게 새로운 어휘와 뭐 새로운 문법을 혼자 공부하는 대신에 밖에서 예를 들어 뭐 한국어를 이렇게 원어민스럽게 한국 친구랑 공부하는 것이 더 좋을 것 같아요. 왜냐하면 이렇게 한국어로 말할 때 제가 원어민이 아니라서 아마 실수를 쉽게 할 수 있거든요. 그래서 이렇게 한국인이랑 이렇게 한국 친구랑 한국어를 이렇게 재미있게 공부하면 내가 아마 갑자기 뭐 실수를 하면 그 친구가 한국어를 어떻게 이렇게 맞게 말해야 하는지, 그리고 어떤 단어를 뭐 어떤 상황에서 쓰면 더 좋을 건지 설명할 수 있어서.
They all told me how embarrassed they were back in the days when they made mistakes speaking to locals. But each time they made mistakes, they took it as a learning process. And on top of that, Even when they were watching their favorite shows in their leisure time, it was interesting to see how they tried really hard to get used to the language.
드라마 너무 많이 좋아해요. 네, 그래서 거기 보고 보통 따라하는 것보다는 저는 속으로 듣고 만약에 이해 못한 부분이 있다면 다시 뒤로 가서 다시 보기. 그러니까 드라마 한 편을 1회를 제가 한 보통 2번에서 3번 정도 보는 것 같아요. 네, 다 완전히 이해할 때까지요.
So Mark, in the end of the day, I personally learned from those group of people that if you actually want to be extra good in Korean, first, you shouldn't be scared of making any mistakes.
Yeah.
And second, most importantly, you have to put a lot of efforts, proving once again that there's no shortcuts in our lives.
Yeah, well, very wise words there, Jong-un, and very impressive, some of those students, the way they could speak Korean. I was watching the Russian student you spoke to, just the speed and fluidity at which she was speaking Korean. She must have been at a very advanced
High level. The highest level, actually.
The highest level, actually. Maybe that's why I should have studied more. Okay, Jong-un, always a pleasure. Thank you for coming in. Thank you. Now, we are going to take a look at some of the cultural events that are taking place in the country.
Good morning. Many were walking around with just shirts on in Seoul on Wednesday, but it's going to be a lot breezier this afternoon, while those in southern provinces can wear another summery shirts. It's going to be as warm or even warmer in the afternoon. Now, it looks like dry weather alerts remain in place for many areas, including here in the capital, while dry weather warnings are in effect for mountainous regions in northeastern regions along with strong gusts, so be extra careful when handling fire. And upper areas could see high levels of fine dust at night. And as for daily highs today, Seoul will get up to 16 degrees. Gyeongju will have summery weather, feeling more like early June, topping out at 28 degrees. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.